right, I think we'll get started. I don't want to make you guys wait too long. But hello everyone, and welcome to Ebel Lake Environmental Education Center's virtual family night. We are very excited to have you all with us this evening for our event titled Who's Hiding at Ebel Lake, where we will be learning about the unique wildlife we might see or hear at night during a summer at Ebel Lake, or even just in the Kingston area. My name is Lindsay, and I'm one of the Outreach and Stewardship interns here at CUBES. I'm here tonight with my coworker Megan, and we will be your hosts for this evening. We will be recording this event and uploading it to our YouTube channel afterwards in case anyone couldn't join us tonight or if someone wishes to join late. We would love for you to turn on your camera and interact with us if you're comfortable, but with that being said, it is also completely okay if you would prefer to listen with your camera off.
Before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the traditional territory that we are situated on. So Queen's University is situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. Specifically, the Ebel Lake Environmental Education Center is situated on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory and is part of the Algonquin land claim by the Algonquins of Ontario, which is currently under negotiation with the federal government of Canada. Acknowledgement of these facts requires recognition of the pre-colonial history of the land and the peoples who lived here and continue to live here. The cultures and spiritualities of Indigenous peoples are connected to the land, and the land is an integral part of knowing and living. These knowledge systems are continually evolving in relation to the land and its other inhabitants, both human and other than human. And the Kingston Indigenous community continues to reflect the area's Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee roots. There's also a significant Métis community, and there are First Peoples from other nations across Turtle Island present here today.
So, welcome to Ebel Lake Environmental Education Center virtually. So even though we can't host this event from Ebel Lake like we normally would, we still want to welcome you. The Ebel Lake Environmental Education Center is the public outreach arm of the Queen's University Biological Station, aka the acronym CUBES. And so CUBES is situated within the Frontenac Arch, which is a part of Ontario where the ancient Precambrian shield rocks of the north extend down into the southern parts of Ontario, and they connect towards the Adirondack Mountains over in New York State. And the Grenville Mountains that used to stand here rivaled the Himalayas in size once, which is massive, but over time they've worn down through erosion, and so we don't see those anymore, unfortunately. And so the importance of the land lies in the overlap of the north and the south, kind of like a funnel, and it gives rise to an amazing deal of biodiversity. And so tonight, we are going to learn about some of the nocturnal species that call this habitat their own. These species not only include fireflies, beavers, and frogs, but also some of the more mysterious species like nocturnal owls, coyotes, loons, and flying squirrels. So like the name alludes to, the Ebel Lake Environmental Education Center is situated on the beautiful Ebel Lake. Ebel Lake is a busy place for wildlife during the day, and especially during our outreach and camp programming in previous years. Besides seeing people on the lake, you might also see and hear some seagulls and maybe some other birds chirping. Might see some fish, turtles, and much more. But what happens when the sun goes down and everyone has gone home for the day? Well, even though you and I will probably be heading to bed when the sun goes down and just saying goodnight, other animals are waking up and saying good morning. Some animals prefer to sleep all day and be awake at night, and we call these animals nocturnal. Just because we might not be able to see them as well doesn't mean that they aren't very busy. But why might an animal choose to sleep all day? Let's learn more.
So as Lindsay mentioned, animals that sleep during the day and become active at night are called nocturnal. The opposite of these animals, so often most humans, are actually called diurnal. Does anybody know why it might be beneficial to be active at night? You're welcome to unmute yourselves or put your answers into the chat.
I see some hands. I love it.
For hunting.
Yeah, for hunting. Great answer.
Mm-hmm.
So hunting is definitely one of those answers. Oops, sorry. But it's our second point for tonight. So I'll jump into it a little bit more in our second. But one of the first reasons why animals are nocturnal at night is because of resource competition. So some animals will decide to be awake so they can eat food without having to compete with other wildlife for it. So if you were to sneak down in the middle of the night to steal the last brownie before your sibling does, that's kind of a human example of resource competition. But if we wanted to look into the wildlife, we can look at hawks and owls because these birds are very similar and they live in the same habitats and eat the same food. But because owls are nocturnal and so they'll hunt at a different time, they aren't in competition with each other for prey. But then another reason is the opposite. So it's to avoid predation. So sometimes nocturnal behavior may have developed as a way to avoid or enhance predation. And some species prefer to hunt at night because their prey species has poor vision or vice versa. And so if small rodents know that they're going to be hunted during the day, then maybe they'll become nocturnal so that they can avoid being eaten at night. And then finally, a third reason is for water conservation. So during the day, when the sun is out, it's often quite hotter than it is at night, which can dry out animals and cause them to lose a lot of the water that they may have needed during the day. And so sometimes species will become nocturnal so they don't have to use as much water and can instead conserve the water that they have. And so this is really prominent in plants, especially with plant species that are native to arid biomes like the desert. And these plants will open up their flowers at night when the heat from the sun has left, and they can keep more moisture to support their flowers. And these flowers are also adapted, so they're pollinated by nocturnal creatures like bats and moths.
So nocturnal creatures generally have highly developed senses of hearing, smell, and they also have specially adapted eyesight, and so we call these adaptations. Some animals have eyes that can adapt to both low-level and bright-level lights of light, while others, such as bats, can only function at night. Many nocturnal creatures, like owls, have large eyes, and so you can see that on the slide there, in comparison to their body size in order to compensate for these lower levels of light that they have at night. And so other animals like bats use echolocation. And so they emit a high pitched sound that bounces off of objects and then is received back by the animal. And so that gives it information about the object's shape, direction, distance, and texture as well. So, did you know that cats are nocturnal? So, domestic cats are nocturnal because of their nightly instincts that they share with other members of the cat family that hunt at night, like leopards and lions, even though we don't have those here. Both wild and domestic cats are equipped for navigating through the dark. However, every domestic cat might have its own schedule and routine that depends on its family. And so, if anyone here has a pet cat, you may have seen your cat looking something like this when the light hits its eyes. Maybe you've tried to take a photo of it at night and the flash went off, or the lights came on around your house when it got dark. But this phenomenon is known as eye shine.
So eye shine is caused by something called the tapetum lucidum, and this helps nocturnal animals have an advantage in low light conditions because they're able to see double the light. So kind of to give an overview of how eyes work, eyes are able to see because of light receptors called rods and cones that kind of trap the light and then interpret what the eye is seeing to the brain. So cones allow creatures to see color and sharp details, and they function really well in bright conditions like the daytime. So humans, because we're diurnal, have a lot more cones, which gives us better functionality and comfort during the day. Rods, on the other hand, are better designed for dim light conditions like dusk or at night because they're designed to gather light and to see motion. And so nocturnal animals have a lot more rods than cones. But now, why do some animals have this kind of eerie glow of eye shine while others do not? This is because of the tapetum lucidum. And so as light enters the eye, it will pass through the retina to the back of the eye where the tapetum lucidum is. So you can kind of see in this picture here. And this will reflect the light and have it shine right back out the retina so that you can the animal gets double the light that would normally otherwise be there. And so when animals that move around in low light conditions, they're able to see so much better because they have this double light. Now, what's kind of fun is that if you spotlight those animals, so using like a flashlight or giving them a direct source of light, you'll be able to see their eerie glow, and it can help you identify them as each species has a distinct color. And so foxes and rabbits' eyes will glow red, cats will go green, like you can see in this photo here. Raccoons have yellowish eyes, and bullfrogs also show green, whereas owls show red. And so the color corresponds to the type of tapetum lucidum that they have, but there is some variation between species. Now, do humans have eye shine? People sometimes think that because when you're taking a photo and the flash is on, then the human eye kind of shows up as red and you have to do some color correction when you're taking photos. But this actually isn't because of a tapetum lucidum. It's because there's too many blood cells in our eyes, or not too many, but they will become much bigger when our eyes don't have enough time to adapt to the bright flash of light. And so unfortunately, humans don't have the fun adaptation of the tapetum lucidum. But that being said, humans are able to see at night than a lot of people realize. And so if you kind of go for a walk around dusk as twilight is settling in, then there's a chemical in your brain called rhodopsin, which is known as purple, and it allows us to see better in the dark because light will often break down this chemical. But when there isn't as much light available, this chemical will allow us to see in low light conditions. And if you want to go out and try and spot some wildlife and see their eye shine, using a flashlight or a headlamp is a great tool, and just make sure that it's pointing away from your eyes so that you aren't minimizing how your rhodopsin is working as well.
All right, so now that we know how nocturnal animals survive in the dark, let's get to know some of these animals that do. But first, we want to know, what nocturnal animals do you know about?
An owl?
Yeah, good one.
Owl, fox, mouse.
Yeah,
Great guesses.
they're all good ones. We're going to talk about some of those. Yes, Sonia. That's a good one too.
Here. Bats.
Mhm. Those are all great ones, and we're going to talk about a lot of those.
But the raccoon.
Hmm. Yeah, you may have seen those around your yard. All right, well, we're going to talk about a couple, but if you think of any more that we don't mention, we would love to hear them at the end.
So what are some ways that you can spot animals at night? Sometimes you can use a flashlight to kind of detect the eye shine, but other ways you can spot animals without vision is actually by using your ears and hearing them instead. A lot of nocturnal animals have a highly developed sense of hearing and will communicate orally at night. So whether it's to warn kin about predation, attract a mate, or appear intimidating, species calls can also be used to identify them. All right. We're going to start off with a species that doesn't actually use sound, that uses light right away. And so if you've seen kind of little lights around dusk or kind of when it's darker, that kind of look like little like pretty orbs of light floating around, these are fireflies. So that's what the animal looks like. Fireflies are nocturnal beetles, and most fireflies are winged, which distinguishes them from other luminescent insects such as glowworms. There's actually about 2,000 species of fireflies around the world, and they live in a variety of environments. But fireflies love moisture and will often live in humid regions of Africa and the Americas. Fireflies have dedicated light organs that are located right underneath their stomachs. And as the insects take in oxygen, so as they breathe, their special cells will combine the oxygen with a substance called luciferin to produce light with almost no heat. So this is a form of bioluminescence where an animal can use their own body to create light. Fireflies can flash their light in different patterns that are unique to each species, and these will help their fireflies communicate with potential mates. Scientists aren't quite sure how fireflies can turn off and on their light, but they're looking into it a little bit more. And firefly light can also be used as a defense mechanism to give a clear warning of the insects and larvae's unappetizing taste because of some defensive steroids that they have. So even though the light is really pretty to us, it can also be used to warn predators to avoid eating these fireflies.
All right, so you're most likely aware of this next species, the beaver. But did you know that beavers are primarily nocturnal as they carry out most of their activities from dusk to dawn? However, that doesn't mean that they can't be seen during the day. So you may have seen them swimming in a lake, maybe. And so the beaver is a national symbol of the sovereignty of Canada, and it's also on the nickel, which is our 5-cent coin there. And so beavers are among the largest of rodents. They live up to 24 years and weigh up to 32 kilograms. They are herbivores and they prefer to eat leaves, bark, twigs, roots, and non-woody aquatic plants like cattails when they can. And beavers use their large webbed rear feet like swimming fins and their paddle-shaped tail like a rudder. And so these attributes allow them to swim at speeds up to 8 kilometers an hour. And beavers can also stay underwater for 15 minutes. Imagine holding your breath for 15 minutes without surfacing. And they also have transparent eyelids that act like built-in goggles. Their fur is naturally oily and waterproof, and they also have valves in their ears and nose that can close to prevent excess water from entering their body when they're in the water. So, as you may know, beavers not only burrow in the banks of rivers and lakes, but they also transform less suitable habitat by building dams. They chew on trees with their strong teeth and powerful jaws to create massive structures that block streams and can even turn fields into forest. Their teeth never stop growing, and chewing on tree trunks and branches helps to keep the teeth from getting too long. And beaver lodges are often strategically located in the middle of ponds and can only be reached via underwater entrances. They're typically home to extended families of monogamous parents, young kids, and yearlings. So, when a beaver feels threatened, it will slap its tail on the surface of the water to warn other beavers in the area and then dive deep underwater to stay safe. And we think that's really cool, and we have a video of it for you. Here's the beaver swimming along.
There. Do you want to tell her? Go ahead.
Yeah, so at the end of the video there, you can see the beaver tail slap. It's quite loud. It shocked me the first time I saw that video. All right. And our next species is the common loon. And so you might notice that all of these photos are actually taken during the day, and you may have actually seen loons during the day. And this is because loons are kind of cheaters. They're both diurnal and nocturnal because they don't actually sleep that often. And when they do sleep, they'll paddle out into the middle of the lake and they'll keep one eye open. So who knows if they're actually sleeping. But loons, you can identify them at night by their calls. And these calls are used to defend their territory and see what other loons are on nearby lakes. Loons are also on the $1 coin known as the loonie because Canada is just like pretty proud of the fact that we have loons because they're cool birds. Loons actually are migratory birds though, so they don't spend all their time in Northern America. And the adults have striking red eyes, black heads, and necks and white striping. So that's how you can identify them. They have a variety of different calls from wails, tremolos, and yodels. And these are distinct to each individual and can be heard at long distances. Loon cries are most prevalent during breeding season, so often in the early spring, because their cries will be used to defend their territories as well as attract females. Loons are also quite aggressive and they can fight all day, and 30% of their battle becomes fatal. When on land, the loon is extremely awkward because their legs aren't designed for walking. We have a video soon of a loon trying to swim and it looks kind of funny. But because their legs aren't well adapted for walking, they can only take flight from water. And in order to fly, they need at least 30 to 50 meters of takeoff space. So they need to make sure that they're in a lake that's big enough for them to be able to fly away from it, because sometimes loon can get stuck on too small of a lake. Loons have a lot of predators, from birds like seagulls, ravens, and crows, as well as some fish like pike and other land animals such as raccoons, weasels, and skunks. But the loon itself is carnivorous and can dive more than 61 meters, so 200 feet below the surface in search of food, which is pretty crazy because the pressure gets pretty strong as you travel down underneath the water. Loons also do the majority of their feeding during the day, but as we mentioned, you can hear them singing at night, so they are kind of considered nocturnal as well. There's also a lot of indigenous legends and stories about common loons, and to this day, the Inuit legally hunt 4,500 loons a year for sustenance. Their population numbers are currently stable, but there's a number of threats to their populations, especially because of habitat destruction that endanger these species. And so Birds Canada is currently using citizen science to try to track loon reproduction and see what their numbers are like. And so if you're out on a lake and spot a loon, then we really encourage you to participate in the Canadian Loon Survey. I think Lindsay can put the link into the chat to learn more about loons and how their populations are doing. So I've got two videos here. The first one is of a loon swimming. As I mentioned, it's a little bit funny because you can see its legs underwater. So I'll just play it for a little bit. And then our second video is of a loon call. So this will likely be familiar for a lot of people, but here are some of the loon calls that we may see here on a lake. So you can hear they come across quite loud on camera, but they're also quite loud in real life as they travel long distances to see what other loons are nearby.
All right, so next we have the American bullfrog. And bullfrogs are actually the largest real frog found in North America, and they can weigh up to 1.5 pounds and measure up to 450 millimeters in length. And so their color varies from brown to green, and they often have blotches of darker color on their back. So you might be able to see in the photo there. And so bullfrogs are among the most wide-ranging of all North American amphibians. And so they can be found in freshwater lakes, ponds, and marshes from Nova Scotia to the continental United States, and as far south as Mexico and Cuba. So they have a pretty big range. They were introduced to California in the early 1900s, and they've also been introduced into Southern Europe, South America, and Asia. And so that means that they were brought there by humans. And unfortunately, as happened in Colorado, these introduced frogs may also drive native frogs to extinction, which is not a good thing. And so bullfrogs are actually nocturnal predators that ambush and eat just about anything that can fit in their mouths, including insects, mice, fish, birds, and snakes. They sit quietly and then they wait for their prey to pass by. And then when it does, they lunge out with their powerful hind legs with their mouths wide open. So the bullfrog has a pretty baritone call, and it's so deep that it resembles the mooing of a cow, hence its name, the bullfrog. Only males emit this call, and their choruses can be heard during the day or at night. And interestingly, frogs and toads have vocal cords, just like humans, but they also have a vocal sac, which is like an amplifier. And so you might see that in the video. There is a sac kind of under its mouth that will expand. I think it sounds like a saxophone, but I'm not sure if that's just me.
So you can really see its vocal sac expanding in that video.
So, to your question, does anyone know how you can tell a male bullfrog from a female bullfrog? Maybe I've stumped them.
Can you tell us, Lindsay?
I sure can. So, the sex of an adult bullfrog can be determined by examining the size of what's called the tympanum, which is also known as the external ear. And you can look at the size between their ear and their eye. So in males, it is much larger than the eye. So as you can see on the slide there, the little hole on the side of their head that is their ear is much larger than their eyes. So as you might guess, in females, it is about the same size as their eyes or maybe even a little smaller. And so another thing you can use is the color of their throat, as during breeding season, the male has more of a yellowish throat and the female's is more white. But sometimes it's easier to see their ear on the side of their head.
All right. And we're going to stick on the frog train and talk a little bit more about the green frog today. So green frogs are also pretty cool as they have 6 different calls. Males will use their calls to attract a female to mate with them. And this advertisement call kind of sounds like the pluck of a loose banjo string. So frogs are quite musical creatures. And male frogs defending a territory have a more aggressive call and growl. So you might be able to hear a little bit of these calls in the video. So that's the advertisement. You can hear it kind of sounds like a banjo. And you can see their vocal sac expanding in the water there too. So that was the more aggressive one, where they're trying to defend their territory from other green frogs. Green frogs are also primarily carnivores, which means that they eat a variety of insects and other invertebrates, both on land and in water, and they'll use a sit and wait hunting technique. And so usually that means that they'll just sit there, and then as soon as a species that they can eat will crawl by, then they'll attack them, but not too aggressively, mostly just with their tongue. The tadpoles, so the baby frogs, will eat diatoms, algae, and small amounts of small animals like zooplankton, whereas larger adult forms will eat slugs, snails, spiders, moths, and flies. So as I mentioned before, males are quite territorial and they'll establish their breeding territories and maintain them throughout the breeding period. These territories are often found in shallow water, and males will sing from selected areas within their territories and patrol the outside edges to see what other males are there trying to steal their territory. Green frogs become dormant during cold weather, but they're usually active during both day and night, and they're typically solitary.
Oh, that's the next up. We have the coyotes. So, kind of alluding to what they look like, coyotes are a member of the dog family that once lived primarily in open prairies and deserts, but they now roam the continent's forests and mountains. And so they've actually even moved into cities, and they're now found almost all over North America. And so coyotes are highly adaptive and they will eat almost anything. They are nocturnal hunters at night and they hunt rabbits, rodents, fish, frogs, and even deer. And so coyotes have keen vision and a strong sense of smell to hunt at night with. And they can run up to 64 kilometers an hour. That's faster than you normally drive in the city, I hope. And in fall and winter, they form packs for more effective hunting. And coyotes have narrow, elongated snouts, lean bodies that are covered in a thick fur, yellow or amber eyes, and long bushy tails. And so you may have heard coyotes howling at night, and they're doing this to communicate their location. And they also make huffing noises to call their pups back, so the baby ones, and they can bark at others to tell them to stay away. And so we have a video here of coyotes in the rural area outside of a city. And interestingly, I love this video because you can also see the eye shine that they have. So see how their eyes are kind of glowing. That is the sound of the siren, not the coyote.
All right, so that kind of gives you a good sense of what coyotes sound like. They have a really shrill bark, so I'm sure it'd be hard to sleep if you had some coyotes near you in your backyard, but hopefully they try and stay away from people as they are scared of them, so that shouldn't happen too often. But now we're moving on to bats, and so bats actually use sounds, they use echolocation, but they're not as detectable to the human ear. Bats will eat fruit, pollen, nectar, and other insects. They have big eyes and excellent eyesight. So you may have heard the saying, blind as a bat. It's actually not true. Bats do have excellent eyesight, but they'll use echolocation primarily at night to detect sound waves, and that'll help them navigate and identify the flying insects they eat. What's also pretty cool is that bat wings contain the same bones as a four-fingered human hand, and so you can see that kind of in the picture on the top there. Because a bat's wings are its hand. So you can see how the bat wing, there's kind of highlighted in different colors where it has all the same different bones there. Stretched across the bat's bones are a thin membrane of soft velvety skin, and this connects the wings to the bat's back and legs, just like the fabric and ribs of an umbrella. Bats also will roost upside down, so you can see that in this picture here, and that's because the bones in their hind legs can't support their body in an upright position, so they're actually not able to stand straight up. When they're sleeping or when they're roosting upside down, their wings will wrap around them like a cloak while they rest, and most bats will take off by dropping from this hanging position and actually aren't able to take off from the ground. Most bats are migratory, which means that they will travel to warmer climates during the winter, but some bats also will hibernate. Some species can travel up to 4,000 kilometers each year. Now, I know bats can be a little bit spooky, but they're actually in decline because of a disease called the white nose syndrome. And this is a devastating disease. It's caused by fungi, and it's killed up to 6.7 million bats in the United States by the end of 2011. And so I'm sure that number is much higher now that it's been 10 years later. And so it's really important that we're able to try and conserve bats because they are a really important species and help to control insect populations. Bats are really cool, and Cubes has actually hosted a seminar just on them. And so I'll get Lindsay to put that link in that chat too, if you're interested a little bit more about bats and bat research.
Oh, you can see the name on the slide. I was going to ask, does anybody know what this is called? Kind of gives it away there a little bit. But as the slide says, this is the flying squirrel, one of the more mysterious nocturnal animals that we have. And so at Ebel Lake, we have both the northern and the southern flying squirrel, hence the overlap of the northern and southern biodiversity that we talked about at the beginning. Both species are similar in color, but the southern flying squirrel is just a little bit smaller than the northern one. So even though we call it a flying squirrel, it doesn't actually fly. So birds and bats will fly by flapping their wings, but instead the flying squirrel should be called the gliding squirrel maybe, because what they do is they stretch out their arms and legs to extend a furry membrane, and so it allows them to sail through the air. So once they're in the air, they don't have to flap or anything. They just leave their arms and legs out and soar, and we'll show a video of that in a minute. And so what they do is once they're in the air and they want to land, they turn 90 degrees, so like a right angle, and the limb that they want to land on acts like a parachute to slow them down. And then once they land on a tree, they'll quickly move to the other side just in case one of their predators saw them. And that could be a cat, owl, hawk, snake, raccoon, and even foxes. They also have large eyes that help them see at night. An interesting fact is that the females are very territorial, while males are not so much. And flying squirrels eat lichens and fungi, and they disperse the spores of those through their poop, which sounds funny, but it's really important for plant reproduction. And an interesting fact is that researchers from Trent University, so kind of close to Kingston, have reported that flying squirrels glow bright pink under an ultraviolet light while flying. So that sounds really cool, but we wouldn't be able to see that, as you would need an ultraviolet light and a lens to be able to see that. But other squirrels might be able to see that, but we're not quite sure why. So they think that it might be some sort of mating signal or a social cue, but it's still in the works, and just a really interesting fact that we wanted to share.
That's why you see the squirrel in the pink photo over there. And this is the video of it flying. It's quite entertaining. I'll skip the introduction. There we go.
Squirrel never hesitates to leap into the void. Luckily, he comes equipped with a built-in parachute.
It's a very dramatic video.
A membrane stretches from wrist to ankle, turning the squirrel into a living, breathing paper airplane. With each leap, the squirrel takes aim and spreads its body into a square.
So you can see it jumps pretty far distances. So that's why it has its name. All right, our next species is the barred owl. So I think someone was mentioning owls earlier as a nocturnal one, and we're going to talk about two tonight. So first up is the barred owl. They live year-round in mixed forests of large trees, and they're often near water. Their habitats range from swamps to stream sides, and they can be found in Canada, Washington, Oregon, and Southern California. Barred owls have large round heads with gray-white faces, as you can see in the photos here. They also have brown eyes, but they don't have ear tufts. Their ears are instead asymmetrically placed to better pinpoint where their prey are in the dark. Their signature call has 9 syllables, and it sounds like, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And it's called a two-phrased hoot. So you can hear that in this video here. There we go. We'll just wait a moment for the owl to show up. There we go. So you can kind of hear, even though it's not saying those words, it has the same sort of syllable pattern as "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" Owls will feed on a wide variety of animal prey, including small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates. They swoop down from their perch, grab it with their sharp talons, and swallow it whole. The owls themselves are preyed upon by raccoons and weasels as eggs and nestlings. And sometimes as adults, they can be killed by great horned owls or hawks, but they're also mainly hit by cars, unfortunately. Females are much larger than males, but the wingspan of both is between 107 to 111 centimeters, so they're quite big. And the owls will form mating pairs that stay together for life. But outside of the mate breeding season, these owls are solitary and instead will live alone.
So a different kind of owl is the great horned owl. It might be the one that you think of when you hear the word owl, and it makes the typical hoo hoo call that you might associate with an owl call. And so this owl is nocturnal, and it can also be identified, other than its call, you can identify it by its round face and its yellow eyes that face forward. And it also has feathers on top of its head that kind of look like horns. And so great horned owls have great vision, which allows them to see their prey and find their way through the darkness, even if it's in the forest with no light. They have binocular vision, which means that they have excellent vision facing forward with their eyes at the front of their head, like you and me, but their vision on the sides is weaker. So opposed to another bird like a pigeon that might have monocular vision and have its eyes on the side of its head, it won't be able to see in front of it as well. So owls are really good at seeing right in front of them. Owls are also at the top of the food chain, which means that they don't have natural predators. However, they can sometimes unfortunately kill each other when they disagree over territory. And the females are a little bit larger than the males, and in northern latitudes, they tend to have larger bodies and longer wingspans. The coloring can also change depending on where they live, and they live on almost all of the continent of North America and down into Central and Southern America too. And the farthest north that they live is the top tip of Alaska. And so although they can live in many types of habitat, they're often found in a mix of woods as well as open fields. And they live to be about 13 years old in the wild, and they can communicate with each other by hooting. And this hooting establishes their territories, and it's also used to find mates. So like I mentioned, this is the typical hoo hoo call that you probably know, but we're just gonna play it because I love it. See its big eyes there.
There we go. So now to move a little bit away from birds and more into the insect sphere of the nocturnal life, we're going to talk about moths. And so although moths is a broad category and there's so many different species, they all have large wings that are covered in tiny scales, and each scale has a color. And together these give their insects their wing patterns, which can help to identify different species. Nearly all moth species have special sucking mouth parts that coil up into a little spiral, and the bodies of these insects are soft and covered with fine hairs. Moths have large eyes and one pair of antennae. Moths, just like butterflies, complete metamorphosis, and so adults will lay their eggs, and then the caterpillars will emerge from their eggs and eat fruit and seeds. To avoid predators, caterpillars will hide or have camouflage, but sometimes they can also collect poisons from the different plants that they eat and hold them in their body so that if they're able to deter predators that way. After being a caterpillar, moths will transform into a pupa, a resting stage that cannot move or food. Often this is in a cocoon. And inside the pupal case, the moth will completely transform and emerge as a winged adult. Once moths are adults, they rely on camouflage and flight to try and avoid predators. But some actually have ears that can allow them to hear the sonar calls of bats. And if they hear a bat, then they can drop to the ground and get away. So they have a sneaky little tactic to try and avoid echolocation. Moths can also find each other in the dark using chemical senses, and some males can smell a female from kilometers away. Does anybody know how you can spot moths at night?
With a light.
Yeah, with a light. Awesome. So moths are likely drawn to light for a variety of reasons, but scientists actually aren't sure why. They may think that moths think that it's a moon, and the moon often helps them with navigation. Some scientists also think that the light blinds moths. They don't know what to do, and they kind of just freeze around it. And some other scientists think that it's because of mock bands, which is kind of like a visual illusion, where if you stare at something really bright, it looks like the rest of it, the area around it is darker. And so moths might gravitate towards the light because they think that there's darker hiding spots around it. Unfortunately, though, insect populations have been declining, including moths, and with lights on, there's the potential that these species become easier prey because predators are able to see them a lot easier, they have less camouflage, they're all concentrated in one spot, and they're exhausted from circling the light. And so, in order to help conserve moths and insects, you're gonna, if you're able to, try and keep your lights off at night, or you can switch to lights that don't attract insects.
All right, so this is the last species that we're going to talk about tonight, and you've probably heard them at night. They're very loud, and these are the true crickets that are in the family Grillidae. And so crickets are medium-sized to large insects. Their relatives are the grasshoppers and the katydids, and they have chewing mouth parts. And their back legs are also larger and stronger than the front pair. So as you can see in the photo there, they have these really big back legs that are kind of triangular, and their front legs are not as big. And so crickets are found on the soil, hiding under dead plants, or also on live plants. And they only occur where there is plant material to eat. And they are most diverse and abundant in humid areas with lots of plants. And so male crickets often choose particular locations to call from so that they get the best sound they can. And they defend these places from other males. Like all insects, crickets are affected by the temperature. So you may have noticed that they are more active and they also chirp faster when it's really warm outside versus a cold one. You might not hear them. And so crickets communicate mainly by sound, but they also communicate by scent and touch. They can see, but not very well, so they don't rely on that. Sometimes males have chirping duels with one another and they try to sound better so that the female likes them the best. Some small species of crickets don't chirp and instead can use sense and touch to find each other and communicate as well. And so you've probably heard crickets, but we're just going to put a video so you can hear that. Some people like to fall asleep to the sounds of crickets too. It's a very peaceful sound.
It's a very long video, so we won't play all of it for you. But as Lindsay mentioned, sometimes people will like to fall asleep to it because it sounds like they're out in nature, which is why I think the video is so long. But yeah, as Lindsay mentioned, that was our last species that we're going to talk about tonight that hides at night at Elbow Lake. But now it's your turn. We wish that we could all go on a walk together, either around Elbow or around each of your neighborhoods. But one, it's still bright out. And two, we're still in a pandemic. But it's your turn to try and figure out what nocturnal animals that you can spot. So we'd encourage you to try and take a walk around your neighborhood or maybe around a forest or a water or a wetland that's near you and see what sounds you can hear or maybe what wildlife that you can actually see if your eyes adjust to the night, or maybe what eye shine you can see at night. So that is your task, your homework, I guess, for this evening or maybe sometime this weekend. But since we can't all talk or can't all experience it together, has anyone seen nocturnal animals to begin with? So I know we talked a little bit about the beginning about different animals that we have that we know that are nocturnal, but has anyone have any stories about species that they have seen at night already?
I've seen many raccoons.
I live really close to, oh, sorry.
Raccoons love garbage night.
I live really close to a forest, so often I can hear coyotes behind me.
Are they as loud as the ones in the video?
Yes, unfortunately. Makes it tricky to sleep. Also, if anyone has questions about any of the different species or nocturnal animals that we talked about tonight, we'd be happy to do our best to answer them. I know we talked a lot and we wish it could have been more interactive and it all in person, but these species are really cool. So I'm glad that you guys all joined us.
We hope you'll be able to identify some of the calls that you hear. So maybe you'll hear something on your next maybe walk at night, or if you're just sitting outside after dinner, maybe you'll learn the call of a new species.
Well, if no one has any questions, that's all from us, but we did just wanted to give a little bit of a promotion for some of our other events and activities that we have later in the summer. So on August 12th at 7 p.m., we're going to be talking a little bit about stars, constellations, and the Perseids meteor shower. And then later in August, we have Dr. Greg Boulte coming in to talk and share, or to share a little bit about turtles and just how cool of an animal they are. And that's going to be on the official Cubes YouTube channel. But the STARS event you can register for on the Ebel Lake website. We also have some fun challenges as well as some other fun species facts on our social media. And we also have videos of all of our past events on the Cubes YouTube channel, so you can learn a lot more there. I think that's everything from us tonight. If you like this kind of thing, please come out to our next events, or you can register for Eco Adventure Camp. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us and spending your Thursday night with us. And I'm excited to hear more, hopefully, about all the different nocturnal animals you can spot. Bye, everyone.